This is Talkin' Tuesday. That is Bill Landis. I am Austin Ward, and we are so excited that the Podcast Daily can't even wait one more day for the long-awaited Ryan Day press conference. I don't know who else is going to be part of it. It is signing day. In the past, we've usually got, talked to some of the early enrollees after a month of going through winter workouts. Not sure if that's going to happen for Ohio State on Wednesday when we get back into the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. But no matter what, Ryan Day will be back in front of a microphone. And I think there's plenty for us to talk about.
So much has happened since the last time we talked to him, and is still happening as we record this. It'll be interesting the tenor of that press conference, because in an ideal world it's all positive, right? And it's not even. We talked to the Bill O'Brien stuff on the Daily for Monday. It's not ideal. I don't know that it's a negative. Let's everyone forget about what's happened the last month and a half and only focus on that and what was me kind of stuff. But it'll be a challenging thing for Ryan Day to figure out kind of on the fly here. I hope we have clarity one way or the other on that. As we record this, we don't clearly, but I hope we have it by Wednesday when we talk to him. But that will probably dominate the conversation, I guess, unfortunately for him, on a day where we haven't talked to him about all the guys who came back. We haven't talked to him about any of the transfers they've added. We haven't talked to him about any of the staff moves that he has made, including hiring Bill O'Brien and this philosophical shift in wanting to step away from play calling and quarterback coaching and be more of a CEO. So all that is still on the table to get into. But if Bill O'Brien goes to Boston College before Wednesday, it's going to be hey, what are you going to do about that for 15 minutes?
Yeah, I think that would be really difficult and a little bit frustrating, because that's the balance between, well, this is now the newest thing and it's the most urgent, and that's what I think everyone will want to get pressing information out of. But there's been so many sweeping changes overall, both to the roster and to the coaching staff, that Bill O'Brien's decision is part of that. In the hiring process and what led Ryan Day to hire him in the first place, no matter what the decision is, all becomes part of that and wrapped up in it. How much, it's always the tough part. Are we just going to move on and pretend like the last 5 weeks didn't happen and dig right into the offensive coordinator spot, which I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, because you do have to start looking ahead to spring ball and how that, what that means for the offense, what that means for Ryan Day. Then we're just going to, something will slip through the cracks and be oh, well, nobody asked about Jeremiah Smith on the record.
Right. I think whichever way it goes, and I hate talking hypothetically about it, and by the time you watch this, it could be decided one way or the other, so I do apologize for it. But I am interested, again, no matter which way it goes, and what the new offensive coordinator has been able to do in the short time that he's been here. It's only, what's it been, 2 weeks since the hire was announced, and the reason I wonder that is because how big of a deal is it then if he leaves? One, what we were told is he's not coming to install a new offense, right? He's coming to run Ryan Day's offense. Maybe put a little twist on it here or there, tweak a thing, enhance a thing,
put a little pepper on it.
Put a little pepper on it, but it's not going to be a totally brand new offense, which I think obviously helps Ohio State moving forward, regardless of where it goes. But is it more of an annoyance, I guess, for Ryan Day than it is something that has a major impact, because it's only been 2 weeks and I don't know how many meetings with Will Howard and the total offense has Bill O'Brien actually had at this point? I don't know the answer to that. I can't imagine it's very many. Even when we talked to the transfers last week, it sounded like it was sort of cursory introduction stuff still. They haven't really sat down and talked about plans on what this offense is going to look like. So I think in that way, it would make it easier for Ryan Day to kind of move on from that or pivot and find somebody new. But it doesn't lessen how bothersome it is, I guess, to have to kind of go back to the well now after only a couple weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I have used that urgency tag, and whether Ohio State had that in December, if they needed it more in December, it didn't matter because they were so aggressive making up for that time if they lost any in January that, I guess I sometimes put too much stock into that and be well, if you don't practice again until March, maybe it's okay. Maybe that's when the new deadline is to have a staff completed. It still doesn't quite still process to me make a lot of sense, because there's so much else that you can do. You are allowed this extra time to meet that you didn't used to have in college football in the offseason, so you are going to have a chance to start install before you actually get out on the practice field. And Will Howard certainly is not going to just waste, quote unquote, waste 2 months of time in Columbus without looking at the playbook and learning it when he has 1 year to go out there and execute it and understand that he's trying to win a national championship and be a higher round NFL draft pick. Like, that stuff has to start at some point. And Ohio State was ready to do that in the middle of January with Bill O'Brien. Could they make up for that time? I mean, if you're adding another week or 2 weeks to go reconnect with people that you interviewed the first time around, make a decision, go through all the contract details and get them in, you can still get that done by the time you get to March. And if that's true, that is still going to be primarily the Ryan Day offense with perhaps just a tweak or two, that can happen already. But Ohio State also pushed in on this move with Bill O'Brien where he's not just the offensive coordinator but also the quarterback's coach. So it's not like there's somebody currently, other than Ryan Day potentially, who could be leading that and making sure that Will Howard is getting some of that stuff right now. I think that might be a more that
could be Todd Fitch, right?
Could be Todd Fitch, you're right. I mean, someone could do it.
Yeah.
Ryan Day could do it, Todd Fitch could do it. But is that like the person that's supposed to be doing it is who we're talking about maybe not being around?
Yeah, I mean, it's not. It's important, and like however long the vacancy lasts, should there be one, I think is kind of time wasted almost for Ohio State. Like, Will Howard is going to put in the work. He's going to throw with the receivers. He's going to get into the playbook himself. But like, you want to start that process as quickly as possible. And if you have to restart it in February, it's not ideal, but it's not an insurmountable obstacle, I guess is what I'm trying to say, for Ohio State. So like, we'll ask about all this, I guess. Because I think even if it's Bill O'Brien is going to be Ohio State's offensive coordinator, then it's like, okay, what have you been getting into since he's been here? And even like this process of going through the BC interview stuff and talking about them about this job probably impedes some of that anyway. So it's like, do you feel like you lost anything with like this weird situation, even if he is here moving forward? And then obviously if he goes, there's more to get into. But there are other things besides that, and I suppose we shouldn't dwell on it too much until we have some finality one way or the other. I'm very interested in Ryan Day's assessment of Will Howard. Sort of like the thought process of, did you think you were going to take a transfer immediately after Kyle McCord left, or like how much of an evaluation was there actually in December? And then the Cotton Bowl was such a mess that like I'm sure whatever plans or grand ideas Ryan Day might have had about using that game clearly were blown up fairly early on against Missouri. How did that impact things? And then when he kind of got back to square one there when he returned from the Cotton Bowl, what made Will Howard the guy that you wanted to hand this offense over to? And there's layers to that, right? He always talks about the exceptional trait thing. Like what is that for Will Howard? If Ryan Day's willing to answer it, sometimes he's more willing to answer it than others. The stuff with the rushing skill set with like Will Howard saying like, I'm not that much of a runner. It's like, well, I watch you play at Kansas State and I disagree. Like how does Ryan Day hope to use that in the offense? So there's a lot to get into on the Will Howard front, and we haven't had an opportunity to ask Ryan Day about that yet. So I'm hoping that that's a large part of the conversation. I think it will be, even with the Bill O'Brien stuff lingering out there. I think that'll be a big part of it.
Yeah, and then the other layers there, what does that mean? This could be the last time that he talks before spring ball. So now that you have not just added a fourth quarterback, but then a fifth, how are you going to manage those reps? Do you approach the spring as there is a competition or not a competition? Do you want Will Howard primarily getting every first-team rep because you are expecting to build around him for this 1 year to make a push for a national title and to beat Michigan and win the Big Ten, all that? What's Devin Brown's role in that? What is Lincoln Kienholz's role in that? I think you can, to some extent, set aside Aaron Nolan and Julian Sayin for March and April. Those are almost certainly going to be pure developmental reps. You get some in spring that'll be different than August, of course, but Sayin is also in part of this conversation, like how you decided to manage the roster overall, and then what you're going to do with it in March and April when you have those 15 practices, which, they don't determine the course of your season, but they often set the foundation, and a quarterback that goes farther than anybody else on the roster.
I mean, the Julian Sayin stuff's crazy. Like just the machinations of it, how quickly it happened. We know that there was internal conversation about like, should we do this? Should we not do this? We know we have the opportunity to bring him in, but like, is it the right thing? And then how? Because ultimately, it's Ryan Day might seek counsel on that, but ultimately, it's his decision. how he came around to the idea that, you know what, we're bringing this guy in. We love Aaron Nolan, but we're bringing this guy in. Like some of the stuff is like how transparent, I guess, does Ryan Day want to be? But I think with something like that, you potentially get into some really interesting conversations that I think sort of pertain to what the future of college football is. It's probably already here. It's like, I don't know if 10 years ago, like, best player available was in your head as a college coach or a college personnel person, but with how easy it is for guys to leave your roster now, like, you know, how much of a obligation do you feel like you have as a head coach at any program to bring in a player like that whenever you have the opportunity, sort of regardless of the ramifications of it? I think is fascinating conversation.
Yeah, that ties, I think, more directly into the Quinshon Judkins situation.
Mm-hmm.
Like more, I think, in some form or fashion, Ryan Day is going to, because you probably wouldn't say that Will Howard was the number one for Lincoln Riley and Ryan Day. They both really believed in him, but the process played out more where it's like, well, Dylan Gabriel's out there, like he's the one that everybody really wants, or, you know, Riley Leonard, like, and then you got into that Will Howard level. But so that, to me, that's like the combination of need and desire, and also having a belief in the evaluation. Whereas Quinshon Judkins was like, here is a pure luxury play, best available player, and Ohio State's got the cap space to land in.
cap space is another thing. I feel like we got good insight from Quinshon Judkins last week about like how he views the dynamic with Travion Henderson. And again, not to sound like a broken record, if either one of them had an issue with it, I don't think both of them would be here. So I'm not necessarily worried about that. But I am curious about like Ryan Day's vision for that. How he sees their skill sets complementing each other, whether or not he thinks they can both play together, whether or not having like two running backs of that ilk, who are two, I think, of the best running backs in college football, and a quarterback who I think is going to at least run some, right? Even if he doesn't run as much as he ran at Kansas State. Does that signal at all a change in philosophy on offense? And it's not like they're going to go from throwing the ball 35, 40 times a game to throwing it 15 times a game. That's not what I'm talking about. But is there more intention, I guess, about being a physical kind of run first offense, or an offense that like builds its passing game more off of its rushing attack, which I don't think Ohio State has always done under Ryan Day? It's just interesting to me. Like there's an opportunity to shift a little bit, and there's enough evidence that like has me thinking about it. But I don't know. Like Ryan Day's like, what are you talking about? Like we're throwing the ball around the yard. That's what we do, which is like also a fine answer. But I find myself a little curious about some of the personnel moves they made, and if that might tell us something about a slight shift in the way they're going to go about playing offense.
I feel he always intends, going to run the football.
Yeah.
You know what you're talking about. Like, it's going to be a hard running team. We're going to be able to run the ball in short yardage and in the red zone. And like, that's the way we build it, and toughness first and toughness that. And then you look at the play calling and the stat sheet at the end of the game. It's like, I'm not sure that you actually are taking the steps to achieve what you say you want to achieve.
Those words are all well and good, but like when the money's down, you're throwing the ball, right? And that's fine because it's been very effective. I guess it was less effective last year, but for much of Ryan Day's tenure, that has been incredibly effective. So I'm not saying it's the wrong lean. I just don't know. Like if I look at their personnel at the moment and think to myself, like, okay, it's I don't know, 3rd and 4, and you're trying to extend a drive to go beat Michigan at the end of the game. I think every year prior to this one, it's like they're going to throw the ball. Now maybe it's different with the assembly of personnel they have now.
Yeah, and certainly you can do that to some extent with the quarterback. We talked about that a little bit last week, so that'll be a fascinating conversation as well with the usage of Will Howard. What I am hoping for is post Notre Dame Ryan Day to go to the microphone and start a war of words with Lane Kiffin.
Oh, that'd be fun. Do you want Lane Kiffin back in your life?
I want someone to hold Lane Kiffin to account
for the $13 million thing.
Yeah, I mean, which is fine. It's stupid.
Yeah,
the way he did it, taking a 2-year-old quote and turning that into a new media cycle. But there was a person who used to hold Lane Kiffin's words to account. And I really enjoyed that part. I had never in my life covered Urban Meyer at that point. So this is 2009. But when Lane decided back then that he was going to say, well, Urban Meyer tried to call Keith Richardson on here, and like they committed a violation when he was on his visit, and they still didn't get him. And then he said, we're going to go down to Gainesville and we'll be singing Rocky Top all night long. You know what Urban Meyer did? He said, hey, that's the lie, and like we're going to turn you in for saying something that's not true because you can't do that. I don't know why, but and then they beat the crap out of him with Tim Tebow.
More importantly,
in the swamp, and Urban smacked him down. Most people just like, oh, Lane's good for a few chuckles. I don't find him funny, and I want somebody else to actually be like, you know what? You don't just get to. You control Jimbo Fisher because he can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
Ryan Day should be able to. Say, hey, buddy, Joey Freshwater, why don't you cool it? How much did you spend in the portal?
For real, though, for real. Like, what do they have, like 26 transfers on their roster this year?
I don't think the guys all coming from Texas A&M were free.
No, probably not. I'm all for that, but it's not going to happen unless you ask it. You have to ask it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't really want to waste it on Lane Kiffin. Well, maybe I will. There's an NIL conversation. There's a roster management conversation that's tied into it. Yeah, maybe I will. And then I'll mediate the summer for-profit pay-per-view debate between
the Don King of Ryan Day versus Lane Kiffin.
Let me bring together these two coaches that I've covered, and let's have a nice little summit about NIL. And
I like that. I mean, but there is like there's that part of it that is fun and interesting. But there is like a legitimate NIL conversation to have with Ryan Day. We're like, was it signing day 2 years ago? It was like all we talked about was we didn't talk about anybody they signed. It was a good class. All we talked about was like, hey, you guys stink at NIL. And like that was the entire press conference. And then the year after that, we didn't really talk about it much because it felt like they got things kind of figured out, at least a little bit. And this year it's like, holy crap, like what happened over the last year to get you organized and funded in this way? Because I sense very strongly that the rest of college football, and when I say that, I mean mostly teams in the SEC, suddenly don't like a world where Ohio State has figured this out. And like I think that's worth asking Ryan Day about.
That's the kind of team that has the most to lose is Ole Miss.
Yeah,
like Georgia is Georgia, Alabama. I mean, in a post-Saban world, is it the exact same financially, success-wise? I don't know. We'll see, but I'm going to tend to give them the benefit of the doubt on that front until proven otherwise. But the rest, like somebody like Tennessee or Ole Miss that are heavily reliant on using the NIL piece and even before then, McDonald's bags to accomplish ends to some of these goals, like they're the ones that have the most to lose. Like the top,
because they don't have anything else to offer,
right?
Unlike Ohio State,
that's right. So Lane's got to. I understand why Lane's got to try and protect his territory and maybe tell his boosters that the price is escalating because Ohio State has entered the war. Mm-hmm. But I think I might sign up for that because I think that the winner of that debate would be pretty obvious.
Yeah, I think Ryan Day is probably is it like a debate? Is that the format?
Well, I mean,
who's a better orator of the two?
Ryan Day. That's who's the better boxer, Muhammad Ali or Phil Mickelson?
Or me?
I don't know. I mean, I think that would be a landslide.
I'll watch it. Sell tickets.
Yeah. Well, that's why the first step is that you have to give the promo on Wednesday. Like, where's Lane Kiffin at right now? I'd like to know. Yeah. He's at his own press conference.
Ryan's not going to take the bait, though, is he? He's too smart for that.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
There might be a way to like sneak it in that gets him to take a shot at Lane Kiffin without him knowing it.
I
finesse it a little bit.
I have 24 hours to figure it out. You got me all in now. I'm there.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm suddenly much more excited for this press conference than I was 5 minutes ago, and I was already pretty excited for it.
Yeah. That's like it's all big picture stuff, right? I mean, I don't think we have time on Wednesday morning to like get into the real weeds. It has to be quarterbacks, coaches. If you dip into NIL, like they are signing a player on Wednesday, but it's like All right. How much?
He might get asked a question or two about that, and he should, right? It's like they went out and addressed a need from their first signing cycle by getting Dominic Kirks as a defensive end. Maybe he's more of an interior guy. Either way, they need a more defensive lineman, and they went out and got one.
Sure,
seems to be pretty good in state. So like it's not a signing that's like worth glossing over in my opinion, but it gets buried a little bit under everything that's happened. But I'm sure he'll get asked a question or two about it. I don't know if it's like nitty gritty, like, what do you think of Seth McLaughlin's game, and like, is he definitely a center? Could he play guard? Like, what determines that? Like, we'll have time for that. I think closer to spring ball. I think if any position we get detailed on, it's Will Howard at quarterback, and then a lot of big picture stuff. It's probably worth asking about the decision to move on from Perry Iliano and hire Matt Guerrieri, because it's not, at least in my opinion, it's not. Like, I don't think Perry Iliano did a terrible job at Ohio State. The safety play last year was quite good, and he was that position coach. I know the recruiting has left a little something to be desired, and I think that's a perfectly reasonable factor for firing somebody or letting them go. But it's not like you hired a dynamite recruiter to replace him in Matt Guerrieri. You erred more on the side of familiarity with Jim Knowles, which I also think is reasonable. But I guess like the thought process there is interesting to me. Why now? Why Matt Guerrieri? Like, prioritizing maybe like scheme and more football stuff over recruiting with that hire, I thought was interesting, given the reasons for why we thought he made the change in the first place. So hopefully we can get into some of that too.
And as we wrap up a Talking Tuesday, there's also still a vacancy on the staff, no matter what happens. So eventually you'd think that was going to be filled as well. So that will take up another question. Again, did it one day early this week just because we're so excited and had a lot to get into with what is going on for Ryan Day. And, maybe it gives you a little bit more shelf life to get ready for Wednesday. I think that's going to be around 9:30 in the morning. It's tentatively scheduled from Ohio State, but we'll have full coverage from the Woody on Wednesday with some snap judgments and everything else as we finally hear again from the Buckeyes coach and maybe some others. Who knows? We'll see. But until then, that's Bill Landis. I'm Austin Ward. This has been the Podcast Daily, a Talking Tuesday, and we'll talk to you next time. See ya.